Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. While we just wait for everybody to join, I will just do a quick introduction and introduce my team here. My name is Rashad Kazmi. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at Knapsack. And with me, I have John Weaver, who is our account executive. So I'll get started. I have just a quick slide deck to give a quick overview and set the context of what we're about to see. So what is Knapsack? I think that's a great place to start. Knapsack is a design system management platform. And a lot of what we do is try to consolidate a lot of the efforts that are being made from design and code in a centralized place. And so really when we look at a design system or systems in general that we see inside of organizations, primarily what we find is a lot of folks have their own source of truth. So the designers are working with, for example, Figma, and they have some documentation tool that they're leveraging to try to create archives of the most last updated information. While the folks on the development side, they tend to be working in their component libraries and might leverage something like a storybook to try to visualize and maintain that long term. And what we find is that not only do we have challenges with that because we don't really talk to each other, and so now there's this whole additional effort of trying to maintain design and code parity, but we also have a lot of manual overhead and maintenance and work that goes into maintaining these systems. And so as a result, even within those systems themselves being disparate, we have tools that really leverage different aspects of what makes up that system. And so you might have, for example, documentation solution that needs to be maintained and have archives. We might need to have our design tokens in another place, and you might need to have other tools that represent other things in other places. And what this does is it creates this information silo. And a lot of times we end up having to have like a spreadsheet just to keep track of where everything resides. We have conflicting sources of truth, and there's all this manual maintenance that goes into maintaining these systems, inefficient workflows, and then, of course, like version discrepancies because we didn't update our archives from the last time, leading to multiple revisions, the costly rework, and the friction that exists within our organization. And so when we look at what Knapsack's really looking at solving in terms of like the problem or the challenges that exist in an organization, it's not just a documentation challenge. It's not just a tooling challenge. We really see like the entire digital production process is a hot mess. It's all of that. It's outdated docs, it's tools, it's manual processes, it's a brittle system. It's chaos. And so a lot of times this gets felt by different stakeholders and team members in your company, and that collective pain really just kind of adds up. So Knapsack, first and foremost, really the idea was to take a lot of these tools and consolidate it into one area. But it's not just about consolidating the tooling, it's about having a consolidated platform so that you can have all of your asset libraries, so whether it be components or design assets, all in one centralized place. So we can get all teams and all groups to empty out their pockets on the table, and then we're able to see what we have. Then we can sort through it and start making decisions. And when we do that, we look at bringing in a lot of the efforts that are being done on the development side, which is our coded components, and then on the designer side, which may be our designs and maybe future specs and props that we might be sending to developers to design. When we're able to consolidate it with functionalities such as dynamic documentation, component management and pattern management, and all sorts of other framework renders and permissions and controls, we're able to take things further and bring in our design token and theming capabilities as well. We're able to then start creating experiences as non-technical users. And if you're a technical user, you can do it a lot quicker than you did before because we have prototyping and composition capabilities. So a lot of times maintaining that system allows you to extend it to your brand teams and your product teams and other folks so that they can take what you've already built and start assembling experiences. And we'll talk about how Knapsack does that here and we'll show you as well. So Knapsack creates this complete solution where we consolidate a lot of your processes, provide a platform for you to maintain all of your design decisions as well as your engineering decisions. And we use a couple of things. There are some places where we replace functionality, but in other cases we integrate into the tools that your team is already comfortable working with. So whether it be Figma on the design side or it's your, CI/CD on your engineering side, we can integrate into your workflows and to your tools. And when we do that and bring everything into one place and create an infrastructure that's a consolidated platform, we finally then have a central source of truth, where we can kind of put what we have in design, put what we have in engineering next to each other, and all the different frameworks that we manage and maintain, for example, that one component, and be able to see what needs to be updated and what still needs to be improved and so on. And having the integrated tools and maintaining that, being able to have everything kind of next to each other allows us to maintain that design to code parity a lot easier, and then allows for streamlined processes where everybody can go and look and get the information that they need. That then leads to the ability to have a little bit of governance so that we allow flexibility on the to our creative folks, but also within the parameters of the guidelines that we provide. And really achieving that idea of design intent being met with infinite scalability. So Knapsack is the platform that connects design and code so your product team has the clarity it needs to build at scale. And the value proposition there is that when we're able to bring everything together and we're able to solve the collective pain and we're able to remove the friction, then what we end up with is a whole new process. We have all this ROI that we can create. So Knapsack is built for enterprise. So we're SOC 2 compliant, we have single sign-on, we have user permissions and approvals, and we're a flexible tool stack integration that integrates into a lot of the tools that you're already using. We can kind of go through a lot of the integrations we have on our website. You can find our integrations page that talk about the most common integrations within kind of your ecosystem that we likely already integrate with. So the ROI side of this is really twofold. One is what can we do to free up your time so that you can spend more time doing creating value, whether that's designing or writing code instead of less time maintaining or trying to keep up and get tapped on the shoulder, where's our latest and greatest, all that kind of stuff. Then the second element is that what does that do for our business case in terms of like trying to accomplish our company initiatives and do it faster, ship product faster, or it might be the efficiencies that get created in our workflows by being able to do QA in advance because we can create prototyping experiences in code earlier in the process rather than waiting towards the end to find out that we're using the wrong version of a button, for example. And these things, we have real case examples of ROI, real tangible ROI that we've created for our customers to use using Knapsack. And this might be something that we can help you guys take up to the appropriate members of your team to build a case so that they can justify not only the expense of having a platform like Knapsack, but design systems in general and the value that it can create for your organization. So at this point in time, I'm just gonna, open it up to John.
Yeah, thanks, Rashad. I really appreciate that. And I will get going as soon as I find the right screen. There we go. Cool. So what you're looking at here on the screen is a Knapsack workspace. This is our public demo workspace. The great thing about Knapsack is it's highly flexible for the way that your team works, right? Rashad mentioned a lot about integrations within different tools. It also is very highly customizable and themable as far as the look and the feel of the workspace itself. So what you're looking at here on the screen may look completely different as far as the way your company may intend to use Knapsack. But the reason that folks love Knapsack so much is because, again, designers, developers, product teams, executives, they can all come into Knapsack and look at what they can find, what they need to find, and have trust that what they're looking at is the most up to date. So let's take a look at, well, we're going to start just looking at a components area here within Knapsack. Is the idea of, in one quick overview, how can we wrap our arms around what's available to us and what the status is of each of those, right? Knapsack supports, multiple frameworks. These drop downs are customizable. So what you have here, may be completely different. Your frameworks that you're using may be completely different here. But the idea of what's ready for prime time and what still needs a little bit more love before it can see the real world, right? And then, of course, looking at it in more of a card format view to really get a little more visual on, what are the available components that we have. If I click into any of these, I go into more of a defining sort of page for any of these components, right? And this is how you would expect it. Very easy to use, very easy to drag and drop these different blocks from here to there. Knapsack is built on top of a block system for the UI. So teams that want to contribute or make changes to the design system can do so very easily. They don't have to be a developer coming in here and working within code in order to create what we're looking for documentation, right? We support basic text or call out blocks, right? We can jump between different sections of the design system or link between them. We can attach different types of media to Knapsack within the documentation as well. We support code snippets, videos, images, GIFs. We're going to talk about design blocks here in a moment, along with the actual coded component or the pattern as well. But really, we have embeds for lots of different types of programs that can embed right in here, including like whimsical charts or YouTube videos right here within the UI. But all the most important things within Knapsack are built off of what we like to call dynamic connections or dynamic documentation. So, great that we have a WYSIWYG editor here that we can make changes, right within the page for what we're trying to convey to teams that are using the documentation or consuming the documentation. But also the most important parts are actually powered by the production components as well. So what Knapsack is doing here is it's taking the actual button component that was written and is living in your repository, and it's displaying it here. Knapsack is rendering it here live on the screen. And in this case, we are looping through different props, in this case, the size property, looping through what all the different sizes that are available within this asset that your development group has already created, right? I'm going to come back here to the size, loop through different sizes. We can do different types. We can do different actions, right? But the great thing about this is because that template is connected to Knapsack, when things change within that template, Knapsack's still reading that template just like any product would be out in the real world, right? So for instance, if we make some changes to this component and we want to support a size extra large button, we don't have to go back and update all of our documentation, right? Because Knapsack is reading what's available within that button. So it's going to automatically loop over and show that size extra large button. That's what we talk about when we talk about dynamic documentation. So, one of the things we hear about most is like, hey, I've got Figma over here, and I've got a Storybook over here, and I've got, Zero Height over here. And we have to make changes to all these different places. It becomes duplicative. It becomes a lot of work. It becomes, outdated in time. So the goal here is to allow teams to collaborate, but allow them to still work in a way that feels comfortable. Designers work in Figma, engineers still work in code, right? But connect that work that you're doing to that central source and put the documentation around that. we can do even better than this. Let's show some cool stuff that we can do, right? I can come over here, I can add a new tab, right here from the UI. I'm gonna click on this design source tab. What it's doing now is Knapsack is looking at all of the different design files that I have connected to this workspace. In fact, I have 3 different design files here that I have connected, and we just use the Figma share links here for this, right? And I can add, additional design sources here. But it's saying, okay, you want to connect a design source file to be represented here in Knapsack. Knapsack's saying, okay, what do you want me to show, right? It's going through the file here and saying, all right, do you want to show what we have for buttons? Cool, we can do that. We can preview it here. What about a box? You want to see that? Well, what about a card, right? The card with a button, right? We can do all of that, right here from the UI without ever having to switch into the Figma file itself. So in this case, we're talking about buttons. I'm going to go ahead and create this one based on the buttons that we have in this Figma file. And now I get this curated page already with all of the different Figma button assets that I have in this file, right? In fact, we're not just bringing over the visual representation of this button, right? I'm also bringing over the spec. This is extremely important when we start to talk about, QAing the difference between what the design intent was and what, user reality actually becomes with the actual button that users are interacting with. And when we do that, we have the ability here to, all in one page, compare exactly what's being rendered from our repo, right? And in this case, in React. And then putting that side by side with what's coming out of Figma. Right now, in a perfect world, we know that these would look exactly the same. These would perform exactly the same. The props would be exactly the same. That's in a perfect world. In a real world, we know that oftentimes we have to go through several cycles here to make sure that user intent is matching. I'm sorry, the design intent is matching that user reality. This is step 1 to cutting the time on that, right? Knapsack users report, up to a 30% reduction in QA time, and largely because now we're able to see everything in one location without having to piecemeal kind of what we're supposed to have or what this is supposed to be through 3 or 4 or 5 different programs. Let's go one step further here and talk about what we can do by looking at a coded component here and what we call our composition playground, right? So what I've got here is my button component. In this case, it's in React. I've got several options or variants that I've already created here, and I can save. I can add additional demos here that I can show. But I'm looking at my primary button here. I have Knapsack is reading the props that are available. A lot of people talk about using Storybook. Knapsack is actually reading the props that are available on this template, and it's creating this template here to be able to allow users to interact with this component without having to have really any technical chops. And I should say that because I have no technical chops, right? To be able to prototype or design or create whatever nomenclature you want to use, but being able to change or manipulate this button in a way that previously only developers or technical people have been able to do, right? I can even do things like change the text on here. So if I'm designing a new landing page where I'm creating a CTA at the bottom of my page and I want to make sure people know where to click, I can see all this render here live on screen, right? And right now, I'm working within a branch here of Knapsack, so I'm not affecting anything that's like going out to the rest of the consumers of the design system at this point in time, right? I'm in my own sandbox. I'm designing, I'm prototyping away here. I can do all this in a safe environment, knowing that I have to publish these changes before anything actually takes hold. But it allows me the ability to come in here and work with these components. And it saves developers a ton of time because they get back to doing what they want to do, right? They're developing. They're not having to create documentation around this. They're not having to create all of these different variations. I mean, they can if that's what they want to do, but But Knapsack provides the ability for teams to democratize who's doing this work, right? Because you don't have to be a technical user in order to interact with the UI. I'm going to come over here and look at a more complex pattern. I'm going to look at our card pattern. If I come back in here to this same sort of playground here that we were looking at before, now what we're seeing is we're seeing that one author call to action, right? And I can do lots of things in here, like I can add an additional author in here, or I can add an additional button. I can choose which one I want here, so I can see how these re-render here on screen. I can add additional, let's see, I can add an additional author here. I can choose which author I want. I can do all this here from being on screen with this card component. I don't have to go into each of the individual patterns that I have here, or the pattern pages. I can do all this right here from one screen. I can start to compose new experiences. Now, that looks pretty silly to have my second author all the way under all the buttons. So I'm going to move Brenna back up top. Again, I just dragged and dropped here to be able to do that. I can actually delete Raul if I want to do that. I can really see and start to prototype with just a few clicks, like what this experience might look like right here. And I can save the changes. But the other cool thing about Knapsack is, like, on that previous screen, I made changes to my primary button. We talked about how I added the click here. Now what I'm doing is I'm seeing how those changes on that primary button affect the rest of my design system. In this example, my one author CTA is consuming my primary button, so I can see how all these things interact with each other. I can see, what code snippets are being generated based on the way that I'm assembling this experience up here. And in fact, I can even go one thing further. Right? I can even look at the different themes that I have here and apply those themes, because Knapsack is actually managing and consuming and applying the different themes that I have and the variables and the tokens that I have right to the component that I'm looking for here on screen. In this case, this is a dark mode. But I can come here to my design tab, and let me come in here to my, I've got all my design tokens here, all my colors, all my different breakpoints that I can plan for, font sizes, spacing, even things like transition that don't come from Figma. I can also define and manage right here from the UI as well. So obviously we support importing all these from Figma as well, but you can feel free to actually create and manage the design tokens from here. But if I come in here to my variables section, now I've got this idea of these collections or these modes or these asset sets that I have, right? And I can do things like change the primary color if I wanted to for just a particular mode here, or a collection. So I could change from that orchid color to that color base of blue. And now when I go back to look at my one author CTA, everything that was that orchid color now is this blue color, because I've actually manipulated that within my design system, so I can start to prototype very fast. The goal here is A, bring everybody together in one location, and B, save teams tons of time by having to go to each of these individual programs or do each of these things 1, 2, 3, 4 times, right? Everything can be done one time and really get a good understanding of what this would look like if we wanted to ship this today. So I'm right up against my time. I'm happy to dig in a lot deeper with folks on a one-on-one call. I'm excited to do that. sales@knapsack.cloud is the way to get in touch with us. Rashad, I'll hand it back over to you if there's anything you want to do to wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think what we are able to see here, I just want to summarize a couple things, is a lot of times when we look at how do we create some consistency across what's happening in design and in development, we think about over documenting, and that might be a good way to kind of have an archival record of like a certain point in time, but really being able to have that real-time connection between what's happening in design and in engineering, and dynamically pulling that into where your documentation lives allows you to have a living document that is constantly getting up to date. So as changes occur, we can visualize those changes. We can go right there and see it and make changes into the documentation. And then the power of bringing our design tokens, our coded component assets, and being able to have that design to code parity that we want allows us to take what normally would be done in a technical sense in development engineering and in code to now be done in a from a non-technical user perspective to create these experiences that I as a brand manager, I as a product manager for this area can then go and take real quickly assemble experiences that I can show to my team before we actually go through the process of a full digital production process. And then lastly, you saw a lot of the spec and prop alignment that happens behind the scenes. This is now really showing the thoughtfulness of how Knapsack has designed or thought about the thoroughness of this solution. And this is really important about setting the foundation of a future that includes AI transformation, is, the ability not only to consolidate everything and get everything into one place, but all the appropriate properties and specs that in the future can be used to link those two together. And so that's really the highlight that I wanted to present here. I appreciate everybody's time for joining us today, and I hope you found this to be valuable. And we look forward to seeing you every Thursday here at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Thanks.